the What Really Happened radio show. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, May 7th, 2015. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials and keeping us out of trouble. We've already got a call waiting on hold. I'm going to get to you in a minute. Our third hour guest today will be Gilad Otzman. He's going to be talking about his music tour and the tour about his new book, which is actually very funny and enjoyable. We'll be talking about that. A week from today, of course, we're going to have Michelle Rosen and the latest developments in the Tylenol murder story. And she's trying to basically put together a funding project for a documentary about exactly what happened back then. And it's an important story to understand because even all the way back then, corporations, the media, and the government were going to lie to you in order to protect a corporation's profits. That was the only motive. They let the real murderer got to go free. They framed some other guy, all to protect the profits here. Now, today is also the 100th anniversary of the sinking of the Lusitania. And it's important to remember that story as well because this was the event that angered Americans into joining World War I, and it was a fraud. I mean, yes, the ship was really sunk, and a lot of people died. But the U.S. government maintained that it was an innocent passenger ship, no weapons on board. The Germans knew otherwise. The Germans knew that the Lusitania was smuggling weapons from the United States, which was neutral, supposedly, during that war, to Great Britain, which made it a legitimate military target. And the German government actually took out ads in American newspapers warning people, do not sail on the Lusitania. It is carrying weapons. If we find it, we will sink it. And the Lusitania was basically sent into an area of the Atlantic, just off Britain, without escorts, where U-boats were known to be lurking, and she was sunk, and oh, horrible tragedy of the Lusitania, and that was the trick, the dirty trick, that got the United States into World War I. And the U.S. government and the British government intentionally sent all those passengers on the Lusitania to their deaths to get people into that war here. Now, before we take some phone calls, we're following the Progress 59 spacecraft. This is the Russian supply rocket. Was supposed to go to the space station. Malfunctioned. It's been in orbit. The latest forecast is it will come down. Basically, when our show was going off the air is the start of the window, and for 3 hours thereafter. Early this morning, it passed almost directly over Oahu. And so we don't know where it's going to come down. With that 3-hour window, that's enough time for 2 complete orbits of the Earth. And, it'd be nice to see it come on down here. But the odds of anybody actually getting hit by the debris are, of course, very remote. They are expecting approximately 1 ton of this ship to survive re-entry and hit the ground intact somewhere. Probably going to be over ocean, looking at the orbital track for those 2 orbits. A huge amount of it is over the Pacific, yes, near Hawaii, and the Atlantic, and so hopefully it'll just be a footnote in history by tomorrow. All right, let us grab ourselves a phone call here. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, maybe Progress will make some progress and land on John McCain's house.
Unfortunately, not going to be near that when it comes down. Assuming the projections are accurate, in fact, it's going to miss North America. It's basically going to come up from Australia, across the Pacific, down near Hawaii, then down across South America and back up onto Asia.
Hey, Mike, I'm still angry at this whole with the Victory Day and the French and England and the U.S. aren't going. There's a disrespect,
they're just trying to poke an eye in Russia's, poke a finger in Russia's eye. That's what this is all about. They're behaving like spoiled children. You know, but they're all out there just trying to build that sense of crisis and tension between Russia and the rest of the world, and they really are. They're acting like spoiled brats.
I'm asking all the listeners to watch it. It's history, and it's smack in the face to the fascists, because they're still around and they're still there, and we have fascism has risen again. And I know some people can't see it, but it's there.
It is. It's here. It's here in the United States. It's all across Europe. When capitalism fails, it inevitably becomes fascistic, simply to perpetuate the wealth and power of the money junkies. You have MRAPs on the street. Yes. That's all you need to know. There's no other reason. It's fascism, and it's all over the world. I mean, you got all these riots because of the economy. It has nothing to do with anything else but the economy, and people are disheartened, man. You know, it's like, doesn't take a genius to figure out what's going on and things to come. Mike? Yep. Okay. Anyway, anything else? No, that's it, Mike. That's all I wanted to... All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We were having some issues with volume on that phone. And so AT&T again, or whatever's going on here. Now then, we're already seeing today that this whole manufactured false flag down in Garland, Texas is already fading. The corporate media has moved away from it. This booga about 51 trained or 71 trained ISIS fighters in however many states it was, it's already fading. They didn't get any traction with it. And indeed, the backlash against Pamela Geller and her organization for their open, blatant hate mongering is continuing here. And there was an article that we linked to from the Realist Report, a critical look at Pamela Geller's well-funded subversive agenda. And I linked to it because a lot of people have been writing in and saying, who's giving her all this money? And yes, she has a lot of money herself. She's personally very, very wealthy. And which she got from her marriage. $4 million in the divorce settlement, $5 million when her ex-husband died shortly thereafter. So she's done very well for herself, and she's out there. But it turns out a lot of her donors are working through an organization called AFDI, A-F-D-I, which allows people to donate to causes through AFDI without revealing their identity. So the reason we don't know who is funding Pamela Geller is they've set it up where you're not supposed to know. You can't find out. Could even be the government of Israel that's doing it. Now, speaking of propaganda and hoaxes here, there was this story over at JoeForAmerica.com about how the leader of the new Black Panthers, as opposed to the old Black Panthers, is out there making these inflammatory statements like bomb nurseries to kill white babies. And this has been seized on by the race baiters to say, see, there's a racial crisis here. And frankly, this feels like another staged PR stunt by a U.S. federal government that is absolutely desperate to turn us against each other. Okay? Because this new Black Panther Party looks like an FBI creation from top to bottom, just like they hijacked and subverted the original one back in the 1960s as part of COINTELPRO. And if you're the leader of an organization like that, why are you going to make a statement like that other than to build hostility toward the blacks? This guy's working against the interests of the people he supposedly is representing, and that's why it just reeks of being another propaganda hoax. Because the U.S. government is trying as hard as they can to split Americans apart, black versus white, young versus old, men versus women. And they're pulling every dirty trick they can, and basically all of it is a rehash of everything they were doing back in the 1960s during COINTELPRO. We have to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, over in St. Louis, Missouri, police have just arrested Dorian Johnson on drug charges. Now, Dorian Johnson was with Michael Brown during that whole altercation that was going on in Ferguson last summer. And I'm sure this arrest of Dorian Johnson has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that just yesterday, Dorian filed a lawsuit against the city of Ferguson, in which he basically points out where the official story was a little bit less than accurate. So it's just a coincidence that they arrested him today on drug charges to try and discredit him. Absolute coincidence. Now then, I got a letter in the regular postal mail the other day, or actually yesterday, from a police officer, who I'm not going to name, obviously, expressing dismay at some of my recent characterizations of the relationship between the police forces of the United States and the American people. And I understand, and I've gotten a lot of emails also from police officers saying, no, you should be putting out the positive image. Well, no, that's corporate media's job. I'm not the corporate media. I'm the independent media. And I understand their concern about the image of the police. Okay? And I have mentioned a lot of this before, but we're going to rehash a little bit of it. Politics is perception. And I understand that the current public image of the police is really being caused by a narrow subgroup of individuals. Now, I know some of the local HPD officers on a personal level, and they have confirmed that it's sort of a tradition or an unspoken understanding that police officers will not publicly criticize their fellow officers. And while this practice continues, the perception by the public will be that all of the officers are cool with what's going on. The tasings, the beatings, the shooting of dogs, flashbanging of little babies, and so forth. Now, while my relationship with the local HPD officers is cordial and friendly, my professional interaction with police leaves much to be desired, and I don't think it's atypical. In my over 60 years of life, I have been the victim of crime many times. Not once in 60 years were the perpetrators caught or my property recovered. The only time I was saved from a crime is when I did it myself, back in Los Angeles when I scared off a burglar with a legally owned firearm. And thankfully, I did not have to pull the trigger. Now, 3 summers ago, here on Oahu, we had drug manufacturing and drug dealing going on in both our neighboring units, on both sides of us. And there was a lot of crime associated with that, including theft of pieces off of our car, which were never found or recovered. Now, the Honolulu Police Department, like so many other police departments around the country, are putting the vast majority of their resources on the street for traffic enforcement, writing tickets as revenue generation. And there's very little left over to actually deal with crime. And so the police, as a whole, for going along with all of this, do have to bear responsibility for the public perception that's going on right now. I, here on this radio show, am not the person who can improve the image of the police. It's up to those individual on-the-street officers who do follow the Constitution and the laws and respect our rights to speak out and point out the differences that, hey, we're okay and these are the problem over there. And it will be a long process. It took decades of abuse and wrongful deaths to create this distrust. And it will not come back quickly. But again, politics is perception. And the perception of the police right now is very negative. Because for the public to trust law enforcement, it must be seen that the guilty are found and punished, the innocent are left alone. But when we see politically connected guilty walking free and punishment seemingly dished out at random, then the public can hardly be faulted for viewing the police not as part of law enforcement or justice, but simply a tool of oppression by the haves to be used to keep the have-nots in their place. And that is how the police are being seen. Now, apparently over in North Carolina, more than a dozen law enforcement officers, including 11 in North Carolina, have been arrested in a government sting involving cocaine and heroin smuggling. They include 5 current members of the Northampton County Sheriff's Office who were trafficking cocaine and heroin up and down the I-95 corridor. And again, there's nothing new with that. When I was going to Cal State Fullerton, the best drug connection in town was a California highway patrolman who was confiscating the stuff from the dealers, and then he'd resell it out the back of his patrol car. And he retired from the highway patrol, and he bought himself a Radio Shack franchise. Now, there's another story coming out of Philly.com. Officers in corruption trial praised as heroes. Now, these officers are charged with shaking down criminals, confiscating money from drug dealers, not turning it in. And they're on trial for the corruption, and the lawyer is saying these are heroes. They put their lives on the line, and apparently the closing statement by the defense was bringing up Sir Walter Scott, the Sermon on the Mount, 16th century war tactics, the entire plot of Hamlet, and apparently reduced the jury to tears. And quite a contrast, really. Because these corrupt police officers got a better defense than Zokhar Tsarnaev, whose government-appointed lawyer told the jury, yeah, he did it. All righty. Now, here's a story for those of you who love irony. Okay, over in New York, New Jersey, the police union is suing the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey for searching the cell phones of police officers without a warrant. You know, yes, you can search the cell phones of those citizens. They're just little people here. But the police, you've got to have a warrant. Little bit of a hypocrisy and a double standard, which, of course, is not what America is supposed to be about. Because the Founding Fathers set up the United States of America as a nation where everybody, from the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, up to the president himself, must comply with the same set of laws. And now we're seeing this thing where, yes, we can spy on the little people, but you need a warrant to spy on the police. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We got a caller waiting on the line. I'm going to get to you in a minute, but I want to pick up a couple more of these stories here. Out in Los Angeles, the ABC affiliate News ran a story admitting the Los Angeles Police Department is using license plate scanners to track the movements of political activists. That's not law enforcement. Political activism is a constitutionally protected activity. But they want to know where you're going and who you're talking to. This is why the police can't solve any crimes. They're too busy keeping watch on the law-abiding citizens on behalf of a totally paranoid, out of their mind, central government. More and more revelations coming out over the Chicago Police Department's torture center, which has already resulted in multi-million-dollar settlements. Apparently, over a space of 20 years, the Chicago Police Department used this clandestine dungeon to torture at least 118 people, burning them with lit cigarettes, handcuffing them to hot radiators, tying plastic bags over the heads to nearly suffocate them, cattle prods on very delicate areas of their bodies. Yeah, this is going on in the United States of America. And they were just simply trying to get people to confess to crimes because it's a lot easier to beat a confession out of somebody than actually follow the evidence and find out what's going on. Is there something in the water in Maryland? A police officer in Maryland has been arrested on assault charges for biting another man's testicles in a fight over a woman on Cinco de Mayo. Now, admittedly, there are sections of Baltimore where you can find men willing to do that sort of thing for $50, but generally they're not police officers. All righty, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. Scott in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Oh, my gosh. The stuff you're just reporting is just outrageous. It's amazing what's going on. Hey, just going to follow up on some of the comments I was talking about on the attack here in Garland, because I live here in Garland. You know, they're trying to, say it's all a big scare. Well, let me just reassure everybody here in Texas, I reload my own bullets. We have plenty of guns. I'm a cowboy and a carpenter, and one of my best friends is a black
rapper from Detroit. Now, when they get past the cops and get to the cowboys and the gangsters, they're in for some world of hurt. So we ain't scared. I'm telling you right now, they can come on, bring it on, because if that's the best they got, we're going to plow them down.
Well, yeah, as well you should. And by the way, doing your own reloads is a good way to go, because they're starting to try and just arbitrarily outlaw certain types of ammunition. And of course, doing your own reloads, for one thing, you're going to get a more precision round, because the factory ammunition, they're not as careful with the amount of powder and whatnot. If you look at any championship shooting teams, Olympic shooters or those demonstration teams from the military, I mean, they load their own, and with laboratory precision, so that those rounds are absolutely repeatable. And it is a good skill to have.
Right. Well, like I say, we're not worried about it. ISIS is like, we see them get, one cop throws some, 2 guys away. They're running around, with assault weapons. If that's the best they are, I mean, let's just say they're even better than that. They have no chance here. We got more guns in the weeds than they do in all their caches.
Well, these two guys who were killed last Sunday, they weren't trained military. They were set up as patsies. We know that the main shooter there was being controlled by a paid FBI informant who'd sort of been grooming him since 2007 to have ready to go for one of these false flag attacks. And probably the FBI has got hundreds of people that they have planted informants on to basically bring them along and just sort of have a selection of patsies to use for these terror attacks.
Well, they got a long road to hoe when they get to Texas. That's all I got to say.
Well, good for the Texans. Good for the Texans here. And again, coming out of New England, coming out of Patriot stock on my mother's side, I'm definitely a supporter of the Second Amendment. I mean, when I was a kid, everybody had guns. It was no big deal. Everybody in my family got your first gun on your 12th birthday, and the lesson on gun safety, which is the second religion. And
I used to ride around in my truck with a gun rack in the back of my truck with guns in there, and nobody said a word.
No, it's just an accepted fact of life. It's just a tool to do the things that need to be done in farming and ranching country, and put food on the table. And the gun grabbers are out there trying to convince Americans that guns are just the embodiment of evil spirits. If you even look at one, it will possess you like Pazuzu, the demon, and cause you to do things you otherwise would not do. That may be true of those prescription antidepressants. It's not true of guns.
Well, let's just clarify one thing, and especially what the cops like to do is if they see you have a gun, okay, immediately they're going to call it a weapon. Okay, well, first thing, by law, a weapon is only anything that has been involved in a crime. In other words, a hammer can be a weapon, a dumbbell, your shoe. So immediately when they call it a weapon, you should immediately say, no, this is not a weapon, this is a gun, because words matter.
They absolutely do. I mean, the reality is that more people are killed in the United States with baseball bats than with assault rifles. But I don't see anybody out there saying, we need to ban baseball. It serves absolutely no useful purpose whatsoever. We need a 15-day waiting period to buy a catcher's mitt.
Well, at least they can watch it, and they don't have no fans and none stands in Baltimore, so I guess it is kind of worth with.
That must have been an interesting game, just playing for the TV cameras and the pigeons.
Man, that's got to be, I would be embarrassed to be waving my hat and waving around like that. That's just, you got to feel stupid. But, they get paid to do that. So.
Yeah, I mean, they're out there, empty stands or not, they still get paid the same. They got, they get a big paycheck out of that. Anyway, listen, Scott, I need to let you go here. Thank you very much for the phone call. And, and again, everywhere around the world, throughout all of history, when the law-abiding citizen is armed, crime goes down. Don't let anybody come out and tell you that, if there's guns, crime will go up. No, it doesn't. Even in Great Britain, when they passed their draconian gun ban. Crime went right through the roof, and Great Britain justified keeping the gun ban by saying, well, even though the people really are in a lot more danger, we've convinced them they're safer with the gun ban. Therefore, we have to keep it, which is that kind of circular logic that you begin to recognize masks the fact that the government could care less whether you're being the victim of crime or not. The government just wants to take away from you your right to say no. And that is a fundamental right. That's a big part of what the First Amendment is about. The right to say no, the freedom to say no. Because remember, there is no freedom without that freedom to say no. And that's why the Founding Fathers gave us that Second Amendment. Meanwhile, story coming out of the Baltimore confrontations, as you were, apparently CNN's Don Lemon spotted people from the independent media and called the cops on them to arrest them and charge them for impersonating the press. Now, of course, from Don's point of view, anybody who's not getting $1 million paycheck from a large media corporation, they can't really be media. And so he literally was trying to get the police to harass the independent media because the independent media is reporting on things the corporate media has been told and paid to hide from you, the American people. So it's getting hostile out there. But the First Amendment does not recognize corporations as having special rights that ordinary citizens don't. We are all our own media, and that, too, is part of the First Amendment. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, over in Lithuania, they're launching their war games now, and the scenario for the war game is, oh, my goodness, the Russians are coming to attack us. And it's modeled directly on the imagined invasion of Crimea, which didn't actually happen. So I guess it's going to work out for Lithuania, because if you're wargaming something that didn't even happen, victory is assured. Meanwhile, over in Finland, they're sending out letters to all of their military reservists to put them on notice they could be called up. Amid the increased tension with Russia, which, yeah, when Russia sees everybody loading up the guns, they're going to get nervous. It's kind of hard to maintain a serene Zen-like calm when it looks like everybody in the world thinks they can solve their problems by destroying your country. 900,000 reservists have been notified of possible imminent reactivation. Now, all of this may turn out to be moot. We know that General Breedlove, who's the military head of NATO, has been out there talking tough about, we've got to go into Russia, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. Well, here's your rifle, General. But Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, has basically come out saying that Moscow is perfectly happy to renew their strategic partnership with NATO that they had before all this U.S.-backed warmongering, and apparently is receiving positive signals from many of the member NATO nations that they want all of this new Cold War nonsense and sanctions to go away and go back to what we had with this new Russian republics, and everybody's doing business with everybody, peace through commerce. And so we could easily see all these warmongers isolated by their own people, by their own countries, by their own organizations, saying, yeah, you know, if you want to talk about having war with Russia, there's your free speech zone over behind that chicken wire off in the corner. You can go and rant and rave all you want. We're going to go back to a world of peace and commerce because that is what the people of planet Earth want. And we are sick and tired of all these lies we are being told to convince us that our path to a better future involves throwing all of our money into the fires of war and pitching our own children onto the bayonets of the designated enemy, because that doesn't work for us anymore. Which has not stopped the United States government from deciding to completely bypass the government of Iraq, their own puppet rulers in Baghdad. And the U.S. is now going to start directly arming the Kurdish militia. This is a bill being sponsored by Mark Rubio of Florida and Rand Paul of Kentucky. And South Carolina's Lindsey Graham. Now, what's going on here is the ultimate long-term goal of invading Iraq over and over and over again was to find some excuse to break it into little tiny pieces that are less able to resist either Israel or the United States of America. And so the U.S. is now treating the Kurdish militia as if they're their own little separate entity. And that's the first step toward breaking Iraq into 3 different chunks to make it easier to lord over them, to bully them is what it was. Turkey has announced they are about to send ground troops into Syria against Bashar al-Assad. This was made public by a senior official from the main opposition Republican People's Party. It says that Turkey will invade Syria within the next 2 days. Can we call it a world war yet? I know the corporate media doesn't want to talk about this being a world war, but look at how many countries have been pushed into conflict by the United States and its allies. Meanwhile, the U.S. puppet Yemen government, whose leader is actually not even in Yemen anymore, he's over in Saudi Arabia, has formally applied to the United Nations to save Yemen from its own people with foreign boots on the ground. Yes, Yemen's under threat from the Yemenite people. We've got to go in there and save Yemen from its own people and put it back under U.S. puppet rule here. Now, earlier today, the U.S. Senate passed their bill to give Congress the right to weigh in on the Iran nuclear deal. It passed 98-1. House is expected to pass it by as wide a margin. Have you ever noticed the only time you get that kind of unanimous vote in the Congress is when it's something that Israel wants and then everybody just signs on? And I love this little comment that they had in the article, which is over in Russia Today, about how President Obama is now supporting this measure. No, he doesn't. It's an intrusion into his power and authority for foreign policy. But Obama's going to go along and say, I support the bill because he doesn't want an overturned veto on his resume. It looks bad in the history books. So Obama's caving in on this, but all the Congress can do is prevent the U.S. from signing this agreement. Congress has no legal authority over the United Nations. And what the Security Council is likely going to do is say, okay, U.S. is out of this. It'll become the P5-1 deal, and all these other countries will sign agreements with Iran to lift the sanctions and go back to just doing business. And the U.S. is already in a panic on this because there's another article over in Sputnik News about how the United States is trying to find some way they can prevent Russia or China from vetoing renewal of Iranian sanctions through the Security Council. And actually, under the rules of the Security Council, the U.S. can't. No doubt John Kerry is out there writing more threatening letters like he did to the European Union the other day, saying, you will keep these Russian sanctions or we'll do bad things to you. And now, of course, the U.S. is trying to do the same bullying tactics on these other countries to keep this Cold War, hot war agenda moving forward. And more of the other countries of the world are saying, now this has gone on way too far as it is. You know, when it was politics and abstract, that was one thing. But now we're seeing millions of real deaths and tremendous destruction. It really has gone on way too far. And probably all of the U.S. allies are looking at the true state of America's military, very expensive, not very good, versus some of the newer Russian and Chinese weapons, which are on display in the parades now, and saying, yeah, we're going to lose this one. So our best strategy is not to let it go any further. There's another article that came out in Asia Times about how the map of the Middle East could be changed even before the June 30th nuclear deadline with Iran, talking about breaking Iraq up into these little tiny pieces and redrawing that map, because both Israel and the United States don't want large countries in the Middle East like Iraq and Iran. They want lots and lots of little tiny stands that they can push around and bully. Meanwhile, apparently there are religious riots happening in Macedonia. Apparently the two different Muslim groups, and in particular their leaders, got into an argument regarding money, and things just got out of control over there. Now, Ukraine has had to double their gas imports from Russia because up until now, Europe has been sending some of their gas they buy from Russia back to Ukraine during this whole issue about the gas payment. Well, Ukraine is paying in advance for gas from Russia, and Europe has said, okay, we need our gas for ourselves. We can't give you any more. So things are getting back to normal over there, at least for the moment. Now, another story coming out of Russia Insider. Videos have surfaced of the Odessa massacre, which are showing that the people who were murdered by those snipers, which we now know were trained and supplied by Poland, and were shooting both sides, those protesters who were murdered were not the same people who were causing the violence earlier. That was always the excuse. Oh, Yushchenko shot these people because they had been breaking windows and stuff. Wasn't even the same people. The whole thing was staged propaganda. And I think the people of the world are finally realizing that this is how they have been controlled and ruled and sent to war for hundreds of years, with manufactured enemies, staged incidents. It's all lies and illusions. I think one of the reasons the movie The Matrix trilogy, did so well is people understood it's a metaphor for the life we really do live. There's the music. We got to take a break for the news, and we'll be back with hour number 2. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Now, as you know, Benjamin Netanyahu, in literally the 11th hour, succeeded in putting together a coalition government, which is, if anything, even more intensely right-wing than the previous one. And in a masterful example of understatement, the U.S. State Department is saying that probably relations between Jerusalem and Washington are not going to warm up anytime soon because of this new ultra-right-wing faction that is now in control there. And we're already seeing indications of increased hostility toward the Palestinians. Story here coming out of Electronic Intifada, where once again the Israelis go into a Palestinian village and start knocking buildings down. And apparently the police preceded the demolitions with tear gas and were dressed in heavy riot gear and confined Palestinians to homes that weren't being demolished. They're talking about now they're issuing demolition orders against entire villages. Now, the Israeli Defense Minister, Moshe Yaalon, is on there ramping up the rhetoric about the coming wars, saying that Israel will attack entire civilian neighborhoods during any future assault on Gaza or Lebanon. And basically, Yaalon said, we're going to hurt Lebanese civilians to include the children. So they're now setting up as policy, after all this time of denying that they were targeting civilians. And then the Israeli soldiers who'd been in Gaza last summer came out and said, yes, we were ordered to target civilians. And now the defense minister is saying, yeah, that's our new policy. When we attack somebody, we're going to just kill everybody. And, true to his word, we are now getting yet another report that earlier today, Israeli soldiers opened fire on Palestinian farmers east of Deir al-Balah in central Gaza, while Navy ships opened fire on fishing boats in Gaza territorial waters. I guess at this point, Israel doesn't even care what its world image is like anymore. They're just going to do what they want to do and know that they can get away with it because they bought and paid for the governments of most of the other countries on the planet. They got them cheap, too, unfortunately. You can buy a U.S. politician for less than it costs to buy an AK-47. Now, let's talk about the economy a little bit. China is going to establish a yuan-dominated gold fix of their own in order to get away from the London benchmark, which has now been acknowledged is subject to rigging. And the independent media has been talking about the very obvious manipulation of gold and silver prices for the last 7 years. And finally, the corporate media has had to acknowledge it. Then they're rigging the gold prices, and I'm sure they have a very good reason for doing so. Yeah, they do. They want to be able to buy the gold at a low price. They want to discourage people from selling their stocks or emptying their savings account, especially in an age where they're talking about banning cash and getting into gold themselves. Now, a big reason for all this gold manipulation, and we talked about this a year ago on America's Book of Secrets, is the fact that the Federal Reserve in New York has been playing fast and loose with other people's gold. And we're looking at this article that came out of Zero Hedge. Repatriation of gold from the Fed suggests historic vote of no confidence. Yeah, absolutely. After the runaround they gave Germany over their gold, everybody's worried. I think probably there would have been a gold run before now, but I think the same way that John Kerry's been threatening Europe over economic sanctions against Russia, that there's probably been back-channel communications about if you ask for your gold back, we'll wreck your country somehow or other. But the New York Federal Reserve, and for that matter the Bank of England and the Bank of France, have to start getting gold to make good on all these requests for repatriation, because they can't keep on refusing, or there will be a gold run all at once. And so the last thing they need is ordinary people buying physical gold, because that takes it out of their reach until the U.S. government bans private ownership of gold, which they have done before to protect the bankers. Back in 1933, Franklin D. Roosevelt ordered Americans to surrender their gold coins and gold bars in exchange for stacks of that ink and paper stuff. All righty, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. Araf up in Toronto. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. I got a quick question. What is Israel's economy based on? Like, what do they export anything, or do they manufacture anything?
They basically will be given weapons from the United States. They reverse engineer them and then sell their copies to other countries, including countries who don't like us. Israel is doing a lot of manufacturing and agriculture in the occupied Palestinian territories, and they will export those products as well. But Israel's very high standard of living is primarily propped up by the flood of money that is coming in from other countries that are being guilted into supporting Israel because of whatever was supposed to have happened during World War II. And the reality, we're seeing it in the United States, we're seeing it in Canada, we're seeing it in Great Britain. Israel is a master at getting into other people's governments and subverting them so that huge amounts of tax revenues flow from these other countries into Israel, and that's what their economy is primarily based on. If Israel wasn't getting all of these handouts, if Israel wasn't parasitizing the rest of the planet, they couldn't support the quality of life that they have there on the basis of their domestic agriculture and manufacturing.
I find it funny how we give them money and then they use our money to buy our politicians and things.
Yeah, it's a giant kickback scheme.
Ridiculous.
It is. Absolutely is. And, you know, the people of Iraq don't like living under a puppet ruler. The people of Iran certainly didn't like it. They kicked out their puppet in 1979. People of Yemen don't like it. People of Libya don't like it. Why should Americans be any different when our federal government in Washington, D.C. is openly on display as serving this foreign power?
It's been subverted, so...
Yes.
All right, well, thank you very much for your time, Mike.
All right, thank you very much. And by the way, your government is also then being subverted by Israel. All right, moving on back to the economy. Over in Greece, and again, there was a brief report that Greece had succeeded in making the payment that was due yesterday, and then it sort of went away. And I think if Greece didn't make the payment, it wouldn't have been reported anyway, because that would have triggered people with credit default swaps to start pounding on the doors of Wall Street, even though Wall Street's rating agencies had already declared up front, no matter what happens in Greece, it will not be a default. You will not be able to cash those credit default swaps in. But they don't want that to be publicly known because that would pull the rug out from under the derivatives market. And so I wouldn't assume that Greece made that payment. I think it's probably valid suggestion that Greece's failure to make the payment is being concealed. Now, Greece is still in desperation mode. They're now introducing what they're calling a cash point tax. It's a huge tax on any money you take out of your bank account, and it's not only for generating revenue for the government of Greece, they're trying to slow down the slow-motion bank run that's been going on in Greece as people take their money out of the bank and they take it home. And Greece is still on the edge of bankruptcy. And even if they did succeed in making yesterday's payment, they can't make the other ones that are still coming up. All right, we have to take a break for commercials. We've got a caller waiting on the line. We're going to get to you just as soon as we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go right back to the telephones here. Patrick in England, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, yes, hello, Mike. There's a couple of things. Well, first of all, we are on the eve of a general election here, which we're going to be electing supposedly our new government, but there's no one going to win in one swoop. The polls are so close, so it's going to be interesting.
We're hearing reports of massive election irregularities, ballots with the UKIP candidates not on them that were supposed to be, floods of surges of postal votes that didn't get delivered. I mean, I think the British government is treating the British subjects the way they did the Scots back in the independence referendum. We're going to give you the illusion of an election, but we will decide what is best for you.
Well, yes. I mean, let's be honest about it. It's just rearranging the deck chairs. Each political party that we can choose from with our free choice are controlled by the same types of people behind the scenes. So they make sure that, here are your democratic choices that you can choose from. We think we have free elections. I have my doubts even about UKIP. Nigel Farage makes fine speeches. But I can tell you now, whenever any of the really small fringe groups in this country have tried to do anything active or to make a camp, they have never, ever received any help from UKIP. UKIP, I believe, are just a honey trap to trap the activists, and they make nice, fine speeches. Whether they will actually go on to achieve anything or whether it will get destroyed or whatever, whether from within it will be subverted, no one really knows. But hey, that's democracy. That's what it is.
No, it's the illusion of democracy. It's the illusion of democracy. And, we got the same problem here, where our elections are so crooked, they have to screw those ballots into the ballot boxes.
Yeah, I've heard about the postal votes. We have talk radio over here, and people have been phoning in saying they haven't got their postal votes, and there is no plan for them to rock up at a polling. I mean, yes, we're still on the paper system. We are still on the paper system. You go into a little booth and you put a cross in the box and you put it into which we have we've got two elections happening at the moment. We've got our local council elections, which is like equivalent to your state sort of elections, sort of the local borough to elect candidates. And we've obviously got the national parliamentary sort of federal, election, so it's both going on simultaneously. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm just calling you about a couple of things. Well, one thing really. Marbury versus Madison. You obviously know it well.
Yes.
Judgment. Interesting. Because if the U.S. Constitution stipulates very carefully and concisely within that Constitution that the states or the federal government shall make available a coinage or a money system, not currency, a money system based upon gold and silver, I therefore wonder whether, and basically the U.S. Constitution becomes part of the overall common law of the nation, including all the, Supreme Court judgments and so on and so forth, then any so-called legal statute instituted later by any government, well, you need to surrender your gold and silver, was technically illegal. So FDR's legal statute back in 1933, I wonder whether that was technically unlawful. It was against the Constitution. And Marbury and Madison was quite a long time before that, and it is still upheld.
Well, you see, when Roosevelt confiscated the gold, we had already been transitioned onto the Federal Reserve System, where even though the currency was backed technically by silver, the attitude was the paper notes were the money. And so it could be argued either way, but I think anybody who has really studied the Constitution will go back and look at the history of the government in Washington, D.C., and see that time and time again they push the boundaries and they just convince the American people, this is for your good, we're going to fudge the rules here, especially after the Civil War, where the federal government just really expanded itself past its original constitutional limits.
Yeah, I mean, there's arguments saying that I'm not sure if it was you or someone else, that any major Supreme Court judgment, like Marbury versus Madison, made in a Western country, technically could be the common law of all Western, countries, that we could quote that, and so my point is that any attempt, which I don't wonder whether really happened, for any Western government, particularly the U.S. government, to try and demand that gold and silver be surrendered to back up a future currency, again, could be argued once again that is unlawful. Just because governments...
All right, let's take a step back here, because you need to understand why Marbury versus Madison became an issue to begin with. Because what happened is, and this is all the way back at the start of the country, politicians started writing laws that were unconstitutional and implementing them, saying that the law was valid unless and until the Supreme Court declared it unconstitutional, then it could be struck down. And that would give the authors of these laws anywhere from 6 months to a year to do what they were doing before the Supreme Court would come in and say, you're not supposed to be doing that. And so what the Supreme Court said in Marbury versus Madison is, you don't need to wait for us. If the law is repugnant to the Constitution, it's null and void right then and there. And that was one of the most important founding principles. But we know our current government has a bad habit of ignoring Supreme Court rulings. I mean, if you look at America from Freedom to Fascism, Aaron Russo's documentary, where he's in there talking to some of the IRS officials about these Supreme Court decisions, saying that no, the 16th Amendment, even if it had been ratified, did not add any new tax authority to the government, and the IRS official says, oh, come on, that was so long ago, it just doesn't apply anymore. And that's their attitude. Their attitude is, we're going to do what we're going to do because we've got all the guns and the body armor and the MRAPs, and you, the American people, are just there to do as you're told. Which is true up to a point. But, people like Ceausescu and Charles I and Mussolini learned that there is only so far the people can be pushed.
Oh, Charles, yeah. I mean, Marbury Madison was 1803 or something. I mean, how about every U.S. citizen should keep in their pocket a copy of that judgment to quote by the side of the road to any police
Every
officer.
American citizen ought to have a copy of the original Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Our schools aren't even teaching our children those documents. If you look at how Common Core presents the Bill of Rights, they've completely changed it to brainwash the kids into thinking that the rights are actually a gift from the government that can be rescinded, that the Second Amendment only gives you the right to keep and bear arms if you're in a government-organized body, and that's not what these documents say. They're literally brainwashing our kids the way the Nazis brainwashed their kids, the way Stalin brainwashed their kids. That's what's going on in this country.
Well, I just thought it was a point of interest and a point of fact that, yes, I mean, I immediately thought of when you spoke just a short while ago on the gold and silver.
Okay, well, Patrick, we've hit a commercial break, and I'm sorry we're out of time. I got to let you go. We got another caller waiting to come on as soon as we come back from these words from our sponsors. Oh, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we take this next phone call, finishing up with the situation in Greece, Russia is throwing them an economic lifeline. Russia is considering providing the financing for Greek firms to construct what is called the Turkish Stream pipeline, which would bypass Ukraine. They've been talking about it for quite some time, and Russia is basically saying we're going to provide the financing for these companies in Greece to build that. It's certainly going to help a little bit, and of course, if the pipeline is going through Greece, they're going to be making money off the fees for transiting oil and gas through that pipeline. All right, back to the phones here. Joe in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Joe, are you there? Okay. Joe is not there, so I'm going to put it back on hold. Now then, nearly 30 more for-profit college campuses will be closing due to the downturn in the economy and students just not wanting to get into those terrible student loans that they're lured into with promises of glorious high-paying jobs when they graduate, which just aren't there. And there's a huge student loan bubble getting ready to pop. You've probably seen it on the corporate media. An audit has found that Pentagon workers are using their government credit cards, which you make the payments on, to pay for things like gambling and prostitutes. It's a sweet deal if you work for the government. Boy, look at all the goodies you get here. Meanwhile, the Clintons are trying to recover from a lot of the embarrassing exposures regarding their foundation and how much money was being pumped into it by people who were also lobbying Hillary as Secretary of State for favors. Bill Clinton's out there saying that, really, it was just an accounting mistake. We didn't do anything. We didn't do anything wrong. It's the accountant. The accountant got it all wrong. Yeah, okay. Now, as we were talking about with Patrick, the election in Britain is just closing, end of the day. The current count is the Conservative Party is just slightly ahead, but not with a majority. SNP up in Scotland is going like gangbusters, but there are already allegations of massive voting irregularities. In one case, a council had to recall the paper ballots because the UKIP candidates weren't even on there. They were supposed to be there. Concerns over ballot rigging after a last-minute flood of postal votes. They were expecting maybe 4 or 5 ballot boxes of postal votes, and 18 showed up at the Milton Keynes Council. Postal vote error in key election battleground. 25,000 Walsall voters could be affected by confusing postal vote envelopes that would see their votes mailed back to them rather than to the ballot counters. Let's see. Polling scandal affects thousands despite Hackney Council denying problems only last week. Election glitches leave some unable to vote. Yep, we have certainly taught them the American way of politics over there in Great Britain. The illusion of an election, but the government decides that the government is going to stay in power here. Canada has passed their C-51 anti-terror bill that basically will allow the Canadian government to abuse the privacy of their people the same way the U.S. government abuses ours. Now, as you probably already heard, a U.S. appeals court has ruled that the NSA phone record collection exceeds the legal authority given to it under the Patriot Act. But the U.S. appeals court stopped short of ordering the NSA to stop, saying that this is now a matter for the Congress to decide. And we know which way the Congress is going to go. John McCain is already out there screaming about the court ruling. How can you talk about the Bill of Rights and the Constitution? Don't you people remember 9/11? Well, Mr. McCain, I had nothing to do with 9/11. Leave me alone. Bunch of statists out there. And even if the Patriot Act sunsets and they do not pass the U.S. Liberty Act, the NSA is going to go on spying anyway. They have never complied with the laws and the Constitution. They're spying on everybody. And it's been confirmed by Larry Klayman. The NSA is spying on Supreme Court judges to find information with which they can be blackmailed. And Obama's still out there saying, look, they're collecting the information, but we don't look at it. Oh, come on. That's like giving a teenage boy a porn magazine and trusting he's not going to peek into it until you tell him to. It's ridiculous. Now, Austria has filed a formal complaint against German and U.S. intelligence for spying on their companies. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. Joe in California, are you on the line this time?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Oh, okay, I don't know what happened earlier. Thank you for taking my call. I wanted to ask a question, but your previous caller mentioned some things, and it made me also think of the video that Aaron Russo made.
Yes.
And one part of it where that Judge Kent Dawson clearly states that I will not allow the Constitution in my courtroom was one of the statements that he made.
Well, my reply to that would be, since the federal government's authority is based on that Constitution, if the Constitution is here, then this court is dissolved. You don't get to say, I am the law and I am the court, but we're ignoring the Constitution. It doesn't work that way. That Constitution is the contract with America. It is the rules under which we, the people, allow the government to manage our sovereignty. And if they don't want to play by those rules, the decent thing to do is to resign and go into some other line of work suitable for politicians, like used car salesmen.
Right. Well, with that judge's argument about not allowing the Constitution, it allowed them to imprison that Irwin Schiff guy.
That's exactly right. And that's dictatorship. When the government is not playing by the rules, that's tyranny. It's absolutism.
And what's great about your program versus other programs is you allow the caller to speak more relaxed. A lot of times if the radio show doesn't like what the caller has to say, they immediately hang up on them.
I've done that from time to time, like that guy who called in earlier in the week screaming about Mohammed was a pedophile. I have a drop button, and I'm not afraid to use it.
Okay. Well, here's my main question is this. What makes Ted Cruz not eligible to be president? Here locally, numerous people are bragging about this Cruz guy and how great he's going to be as president, when in reality he's not eligible, correct?
Well, under the Constitution says presidents have to be natural-born citizens. Ted Cruz's mother is an American. His father was Cuban. He was born in Canada. Now, because of his mother, he is a U.S. citizen, but he is not a natural-born citizen. The people who are trying to get around this are saying, well, the part of the Constitution where it says natural-born has never been legally defined. And that's a very dangerous idea, that the Constitution is not relevant or valid or binding until some judge somewhere says this is what it means. We don't need a judge to tell us what the Constitution means. We, the people, wrote it. It's up to them to follow those rules and not try and weasel word around it. But, the fact of the matter is that natural born means born in this country, not up in Canada, which is still its own separate country, despite the North American Union. And NAFTA. But Ted Cruz, technically under the Constitution, he cannot be the president. He is not natural born in this country.
Okay. Well, that was my question. I was wondering how he was eligible or not eligible.
He isn't, but the political machine is going to force him on us. And at this point, the politicians and the political structure of this country, they don't follow the Constitution. George Bush said it's a blankety-blank piece of paper. They don't want to be bound by the rules. They're trying to get rid of it any way that they can so that they can move on forward to this fascist dictatorship they've been trying to build for all these years. Joe, I got to let you go. Thank you for the phone call. We got to take a break for commercials. Back with another phone call after these few words. America, welcome back to the show here. And over at Global Research, they had an article about how documents are continuing to surface in Latin America regarding a U.S. program called Operation Condor. Now, this was back in the 1970s and the 1980s when the U.S. was even then playing their little game of overthrow an elected government, put in a U.S. puppet dictatorship. And Operation Condor was the U.S. operation to kidnap, torture, and kill anybody who stood up to these imposed U.S. dictatorships. And among the victims being counted were 80 Uruguayans, 50 Argentines, 20 Chileans, and a dozen other from Bolivia, Peru, and Ecuador, who were targeted by Operation Condor. The U.S. was running death squads in the South American countries to silence opposition to the U.S. puppets. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How are you, Mike?
Fine.
You know, like you and I both know, I mean, we all know that the Patriot Act and this Bill C-61 is just window dressing, right? It doesn't matter whether it passed or not. They were doing it all the while, spying on us.
Yeah, they have been. It wasn't as widespread. I mean, due to technological limitations back in the 1980s, Echelon was having to target specific individuals. And unfortunately, even back then, a lot of it was corporate espionage, overseas contracts, things like that. But they were evading the privacy laws. But today, they're basically just, again here in the United States, the federal government is acting as if the Constitution and the Bill of Rights is not binding on them. And they think those of us out here who think it ought to be are some kind of antiquated, out-of-touch Luddites who don't understand. As John McCain says, have you forgotten 9/11? No, I remember 9/11, and I know who really did it, too. And it wasn't me, so you don't have any business peeking into my personal communications.
And yet they swear an oath, and it means nothing to them, right?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, well, it's like anything else a politician says. They're going to say what you want to hear to get your vote and your support, and then they'll promptly forget about it.
So, anyway, all that aside, I have a question concerning, the subjugation of our governments by a foreign body. It was just recently in the news that, of course, Canada has certain politicians, again, it was recently in the news, that, are subverted by a foreign government. Now, I have a question for you. Do you think that the people that are controlling these big, huge corporations, whether they be banks or oil companies, whatever, do you think they have anything to do with this? I mean, a tiny little country like Israel, I have a hard time believing they have the power to do this without some big financial backing.
Well, yeah, because, the owners of the private central banks are very much tied in with Israel. And they exert a tremendous amount of influence that way. I mean, even above board, deciding what nation, what government gets financed and what does not. And then, of course, there's the below board, direct bribing or blackmailing of politicians. Israel's a master at that game because that's something that, they've been doing for hundreds and hundreds of years. But there's absolutely no question. I mean, Ted Cruz is out there. He's getting the Defender of Israel award because of his unwavering support for Israel. And he's out there like that's going to be seen as a good thing by the American people. No, we need candidates who are defenders of America and defenders of the Constitution and defenders of the Bill of Rights, and who are champions the unwavering support of the American people and what's best for this nation. And it is humiliating and degrading to the American people to see all of our candidates lined up for next year's election competing with each other over who can kiss Israel's butt longest, deepest, and wettest.
Yeah, it is shameful. It is a shameful display. Unfortunately, we're not far behind up here. I love your show. I'll continue to support you. Thanks a lot, Mike. You have a good one.
Thank you very much for the phone call, and we're going to switch over here to James in North Carolina. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Just one little thing. I was looking at some information a while back, and you were talking about the problem that Ted Cruz is going to have in meeting the constitutional qualifications to run for president. I think Marco Rubio gets knocked out also. He's got some serious qualification problems. He was both of his parents are Cuban, were Cuban immigrants, and he was born in this country in 1971, but his parents were not naturalized citizens until 1970.
No. The way the rules are in this country, if he was born in this country, he is automatically a citizen regardless of the citizenship of his parents. And because he was born in this country, he is natural born, and he does meet that requirement. Now, there are a lot of people who are talking about changing that law that says if you're born in this country, you're automatically a citizen because of the so-called anchor baby issue for the illegal immigrants who will, they'll smuggle a woman across the border, and she plops a baby down, and then it's impossible to deport her because her baby is automatically a U.S. citizen. But in the case of Rubio, regardless of the citizenship of his parents, if he's born in this country, he is a U.S. citizen, and he's a natural-born U.S. citizen. Doesn't mean I'm going to support him or vote for him, because he's also a staunch supporter of Israel, but he does meet that qualification.
Well, there have been some, like you say, I believe that the anchor baby issue is really a misreading of the 14th Amendment. Or a misapplication of it. And I think, there have been constitutional scholars who've also stated that. So it's whether or not, I mean, if it's traditional, if it's been going on for this long, probably he would be, safe on that point.
Well, a lot of things are done on the basis of we've been doing it this way all along. And again, if you go back to Sullivan versus United States, where District Judge James C. Fox admits in the court record the 16th Amendment was not actually ratified. And then he goes on to say, we've been acting as if it were so long that we might as well just accept that this is the way things are done. In other words, the judge is saying, the judges all know the 16th Amendment wasn't ratified. They're just going along with it because, after all, their courtrooms and their staff and their little robes and everything are funded from tax dollars. So they're just going to nudge, wink, wink, say no more, and go along with it. And there is a lot of law that isn't really law, isn't really constitutional, but it is done out of force of habit. And certainly the immigration issue has been a complex issue because of the way these people born in this country are automatically citizens. And I don't really have a problem with that, by the way. But there's no question it's being exploited by the illegals coming to this country. And the correct solution is to have our borders secured so they don't get into the country to plop down a baby in the first place. And then you don't have to deal with the issue of deporting the mother with a baby that's a U.S. citizen. But all this money for war, all this money for security walls around Israel, and yet they can't put up a decent fence down there across our southern border with Mexico.
No, it's likely not going to be done anytime soon either.
Well, it's amazing. Eisenhower did it. Eisenhower shut down the illegal immigration from Mexico with only 1/10 the staff of the immigration agency that we have today. Our border is porous because somebody's political agenda wants it to be porous. Certainly Hillary is out there screaming about how if they get over the fence, they're automatically a citizen and eligible to vote because she's counting on that Hispanic vote and the female vote to put her in the White House because she doesn't have anything else to recommend her for the job.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We're coming up here on the top of the hour. When we come back from the news break, Gilad Otzman talking about his tour, his music. He's a world-class saxophone artist, and he's got a new book out, and it's really very, very funny, but I'm not going to spoil it. I'll let him tell you all about that. Meanwhile, getting on to human-caused global warming, the former chief of the UN, Kofi Annan, is out there saying that we should all learn how to eat insects in order to fight global warming. That's the new suggestion. You go on out, eat the cockroaches, eat the worms, and you're going to help fight global warming, which doesn't actually exist. I think this is really getting out there, trying to push this agenda. There's the music. Going to take a break for the news, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And joining us over Skype right now is Gilad Otzman, world-class saxophone artist, author, peace activist. And Gilad, thank you for spending time with us today.
Man, it's always a pleasure to be with you.
Well, I just reposted to the top of my website the list of your tour dates and locations. And where are you exactly right now?
I'm actually in New York, in Brooklyn. We had yesterday a very interesting dialogue with Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro. It's the first time I shared a stage with a rabbi. And it was very, very interesting. We share a lot of thoughts. It was actually very difficult to see what we don't agree on, except the fact that he believes in the Torah and I'm not. and from tomorrow, I really tour all over the country, signing my new book, A to Zion. It's a satirical book, but it is I think it's very revealing. I think that you got one of the first copies.
Yes, I did, and I enjoyed it immensely here, and it's a fun book. It's a humorous book for those whose entire self-valuation is based on always being offended by something. They're probably not going to be entirely happy with the book, but we enjoyed it. I think my absolute favorite out of this humorous lexicon was klezmer, which is defined as gypsy music played so badly it became a new genre. And
it's quite horrid music, klezmer. Yeah, I managed to survive it. I'm in general, you know, I'm a Holocaust survivor. Did you know?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, I'm you know, in spite of all the Holocaust indoctrination, I'm still a peace-loving person. I love my neighbor, you know. This is what I call the Holocaust survivor, people who survived the indoctrination.
Well, I guess that I qualify as that one as well. I notice you've even got a mention of Uri Geller in here, proves that we can bend everything. And it is. I do have to disagree with you about Woody Allen because I don't really consider him unattractive, but the rest was very much on. It is a very, very funny book, and I really tried to, you know, as I wrote to you, you know, it's kind of a toilet book, really. You know, it's like if you want to understand the conflict, I'm dealing with it now for 15 years. Or 20 years, I don't know where to start to count, when to count from. And I really like aphorism. I really like, I think that I'm gifted in producing a one-sentence observation. Like Jewish power, you know, the ability to stop us discussing what Jewish power is, you know, and so on and so on and so on. And my friend Enzo Apicella picked on this ability, and he said, "Yeah, Gilad, just come with all your aphorisms, and I will do the paintings." And it was a lot of fun to do it. And in fact, we did it 2 years ago. And I thought it, you know, I thought it was a private joke. But what encouraged me to bring it out? Actually, the Charlie Hebdo. Ah, okay.
You know, so I thought, you know, this is Charlie Hebdo. You know, everybody is Je suis Charlie. I'll show them what it means to be Je suis Gilad. You know, Charlie Hebdo obviously were uniquely pro-Zionist and.
Yeah, but Charlie Hebdo wasn't even clever or funny, whether it was the cartoons they did
I totally agree.
About Islam or even Christianity. A lot of people, you know, there's Charlie Hebdo free speech, but a lot of what they did about Jesus and the Pope was very offensive, even to me, and I'm an atheist. So
yeah, I agree with you. I feel exactly the same. So I decided, you know, this is my answer. I think that with Enzo, we are definitely more sophisticated, actually less offensive. So far, as I can see, a lot of Jews kind of in my concerts buy the book, and I see them laughing. I didn't see a complaint yet. I'm sure that Dershowitz would have liked to run to CNN or Fox, but you know, as a person who is implicated in pedophilia, I don't think that is very welcome in.
I think if Dershowitz attacked your book on the media, it would probably boost the sales. So
absolutely, and I wish he would, because he really sold a lot of Wandering Who. He went, I don't know if you remember, he went to Fox News. He said, "This guy is he says an anti-Semite." Anti-Semite? Well, we like anti-Semite, you know. He kind of sold quite a lot, but I don't know. I don't know if anyone is willing to listen to him. I can see, I'm in America now, and I can see that this Zionist craze is backfiring big time. The other day I saw Pamela Geller trying to excuse herself on CNN, and she was confronted with total contempt. People start to see that this hardcore Zionist victimhood is actually leading America into a disaster.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with that anytime you have a propaganda campaign of any kind, it's got a shelf life past which people just get sick of hearing about it. And I think certainly among the younger segment of our population, there's already this huge burnout on always being taught about the Holocaust, because For the vast majority of us, this all happened before we were even born, and we're just tired of hearing it. We say, we're in the 21st century. Let us all agree that we're going to be dealing with the problems of the 21st century and not be, stuck in time, in the middle of the last century, which is what a lot of people are doing. But to get back to
It is very clever what you're saying about shelf life. I think that this is what it is, They had the Holocaust on their side. They could do a lot with it, and they definitely did a lot, but it got to the point now that we start to ask ourselves, many people start to ask ourselves, what is going on? Are they really insisting to bring another Holocaust on themselves? Look what they're doing in Israel, Palestine, Jewish lobby in America, Netanyahu coming to your Congress, and you see your own politician humiliated. This is not making Zion, Israel, and even Jews very loved.
Well, we know that support for Israel among American Jews is in decline. We know that the Christian Zionist movement in the United States has dwindled by almost half just over the last 3 to 4 years. And again, it's not because of anti-Semitism or Jew hate, it's because the world is honestly watching the behavior of Israel's government, and it's only going to get worse with this new ultra-right coalition Netanyahu put together, where already the army is out today shooting Palestinian farmers, the Israeli Navy shot up some more fishing boats. They can't go on doing that and say, it's okay for us to do this because of something that happened before we were all born. People are seeing through that. And again, the real issue is the behavior of Israel's government, the behavior of all our governments, and I think the people of the world are now stepping back and objectively looking at what their governments are doing in their name. They're not falling for the jingoism, the propaganda, or the story anymore. Gilad, we have to take a break for commercials. 4 minutes for a commercial break, and we'll be back with Gilad Atzmon. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Gilad Atzmon, saxophone star, author, peace activist. I'm flipping through your book here. And by the way, I would call it a bathroom book rather than a toilet book because the latter has some unfortunate associations. This is not pornography. This is something that anybody can read. And I'm looking at one. Historian, a person who helps us conceal our past.
Yeah, this is very unfortunate, but this is where we are living. This is the reality that we see total betrayal of academia, which is not very surprising. I see it within the context of the debate, of historical debate between Athens and Jerusalem. Athens, the birth of truth, and Jerusalem, the birth of law and correctness. It's quite devastating. Is there any kind of entry that you were not sure about?
I think there was one, but I actually forget which one it was. I found the book, again, very entertaining here. But what's really interesting, getting on back to how the world is starting to see the reality of what's going on rather than continue to simply believe in the myths and legends. We're seeing all this talk about freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Pamela Geller was trying to justify her Mohammed cartoon contest, which is very clearly an attempt to provoke a response so that she could use the response for politics. But at the same time, in the United States, which is supposed to be the champion of freedom of speech, attacks on Islam, even Christianity, are considered freedom of speech, and yet we consistently see all of these laws and rules that say you can't say anything about Israel or the Jews. That's hate speech. We even had a CNN commentator the other come out and say that hate speech isn't protected by the Bill of Rights, and yet there's nothing in the Bill of Rights that delineates what speech is acceptable or not. And freedom of speech means the freedom to say things that others may find offensive, and the correct response is for them to come back and say, I think you're wrong because. But we're seeing, Pamela Geller puts her very hateful posters up on buses, and yet others who are putting up or trying to put up ads about U.S. support for illegal settlements in Palestine, those are struck down. And that very obvious double standard and hypocrisy is undermining.
And this is exactly what Jewish power is all about. Jewish power is that which you are not allowed to speak about. And you in the beginning of the show, you labeled me as an activist. I'm not an activist at all. I've never been an activist. I've never been associated with any political body or activist body. Rather than being an activist, I'm very active. And what I argue is that here, especially in America, not in Britain, not in France, you have the solution to all your problems embedded in your constitution. It's indeed the First Amendment. I believe that the ability to say what you think, what you believe, what you see is the cure for the most problematic political issues. This is the thing that made America such a special place for such a long time. And it's not a secret that there is an attempt to suppress this crucial element within that is so important within your culture. And the biggest enemy of freedom of speech, of the First Amendment, is political correctness. What is political correctness? Political correctness is politics that doesn't allow political opposition. Political correctness in that sense is exactly the same thing as dictatorship. But in fact, it is far worse than dictatorship, because in a dictatorship, you are suppressed by an external body, by a dictator, by a ruler, by an institute. But in the case of political correctness, it is self-suppression. Now, if we want to understand how it works, we have to look at the people who fight to impose this correctness on us. And it is not a secret when we look into it, we do not just find Jewish bodies, we actually find the Jewish left. The people who are supposed to be our greatest allies in the battle for justice. We find people like Jewish Voice for Peace. We find like a body like Mondewise. Mondewise is now the biggest outlet on Palestine, but Mondewise changed recently, like actually 2-3 years ago, its comment policy to say that they ban any attempt to discuss the problems in Israel in the context of Jewishness. So on the one hand, we have the Israeli government approving, the Israeli cabinet approving of the Israeli national bill, which says that Israel is the Jewish state and all its policies are driven by the Jewishness of the state. And then we have the Jewish left that bans us from dealing with it. We have the same happened with Noam Chomsky and the lobby, the book on the lobby by Mearsheimer and Walt. Chomsky was the first one Chomsky together with actually Democracy Now! Instead of bringing the authors of the book and debating with them, that we brought Chomsky to this Jewish TV show to denounce the book. It is slightly pathetic, but I think that the more they do, the more we understand the complexity of the situation, and we can identify who are dragging us down.
Well, I think it is this constant double standard and hypocrisy that is undermining the credibility of Israel's supporters, where they can't come out and call themselves the most democratic nation in the Middle East and supporting American values. At the same time, they're saying it's okay for you under the First Amendment to criticize the Palestinians or the Muslims or even the President of the United States, but you can't criticize Israel or Netanyahu's government. That crosses the line. The First Amendment doesn't recognize a line, and the more they push this double standard, the more I think they are bringing harm to themselves. And that is why, I mean, recent polls are showing support for Israel is very much in decline, not just for the monetary reason, because they obviously don't really support and agree with the founding principles of the United States. They support freedom of speech only when you say things they want you to say. And that's the issue there. Now, we have to take another 4-minute break for commercials. And then we'll come on back. I want to talk about your book a little bit more, the rest of your tour. Any chance you're going to get out here to Hawaii?
Oh, man, I'd love to come to Hawaii. We have to arrange it. We have to take care of it.
We do. Claire cannot wait to meet you in person and throw sheet music at you. So we're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Gilad Atzmon, and I am flipping through your book here. By the way, I think you and I have a different definition of the word activist, because for me, an activist doesn't have to belong to a political group. You can be an activist as an individual. I consider myself an activist. I'm not signed up with anybody. But getting back to your book, I loved your definition of the G-spot. I can't repeat it on the radio or they'll take our license away. But I'm looking at this other one, the Jewish American Princess, a punishment awaiting every Jewish American male. Also some of the Goyim, because my first wife was a Jewish American princess. And let's see what else we've got here. Natural death, not very common in Gaza. Where can people get this book right now?
Okay, so this is a bit of a fiasco. It was supposed to be available already on Amazon, but we were some bureaucratic issues. And anyway, I can see that selling it on Amazon in America, I am actually losing money. If somebody wants to break me completely, they should buy 2,000 copies. But on my website, it is already available, and we have copies. We have quite a lot of copies in America. So for the time being, for the next few days, just buy it on the shop on my website on gilad.co.uk, and it will be on Amazon. It is already on Amazon, but it's kind of through England, so it's quite complicated. For the time being, you can get it on my website. It's a bit of a fiasco, or come to my to meet me. I'm all over the country in the next few days, and it will be cheaper, and you will get it signed.
Well, that would be wonderful here. I'm linking to the page right now from whatreallyhappened.com, so people will go there and get the book until you can sort out the issues with Amazon. Where are you going?
Because the book officially is kind of only out on the 27th, so it's not that Amazon did something wrong. It's just we were not ready early enough.
Okay, so where are you going to be appearing next, like through this weekend, next week?
So I'm actually trying to log into my to the wanderingu.com, and so I myself can see where I am. Tomorrow I'm in Denver. Let me see if we can. No, not the wanderingu.com. Tomorrow I'm in Denver. On Saturday, I don't know if there is something lined up. On Sunday, we are in Levantine Center. I'm just trying to get to my tour myself so I can.
Well, I actually have it up here because I linked to it earlier. Basically,
all right,
tomorrow.
Tomorrow. So tomorrow, okay, you do it.
All right, tomorrow you're going to be at the Mutiny Now Art Books and Coffee in Denver, Colorado. Sunday, Gilad is going to be at the Levantine Center in Los Angeles, talking about From A to Zion and the Palestinian Right of Return. On Monday, May 11th, talking about the book in San Diego. It doesn't actually say what the venue is to be announced.
It's a no actually okay, we have it here. It's in if you people go to wanderingwho.com, they can see the address. It's a free admission, Cardiff by the Sea Branch Library, 2081 Newcastle Avenue, Cardiff by Sea. Sound almost like in Wales in England. So we have now the address where we are. We are in Cardiff, and then Madison. In Madison, where are we? In the where one?
It's 122 State Street in Madison. It doesn't. Yeah, we've got that as well here. Thursday in Chicago, Friday in Portland, Oregon. You're all over the place. Seattle on Saturday, the 16th. Sunday the 17th, Houston, Texas. And again, go to thewanderinghoo.com or to the list of tour dates and locations. And I'm going to put this up also at whatreallyhappened.com so that people can get out. Are you doing any music this trip, or it's just the book and tell?
Yeah, in every place I go, I meet always there are musicians who like to play with me, and they come and they start to play, and I usually join them and jam. So if anyone is interested in my music, it is more than likely that you will have a chance to hear me play, but it is mainly kind of signing books, so it's not a tour of concerts. I did a tour of concerts in September, and I will probably do another one in the autumn. But this is kind of mainly dedicated to the book. By the way, we have now a venue in Austin. It will be on the site again, and on the 19th I will be back in New York playing at Zeb's. This is, I can see that it's not yet on the site, but I'm really looking forward.
All righty. Okay, well, listen, we're coming up to the end of this segment. I think I'm just going to hold you until the end of the show. Is that okay with you, Gilad?
Absolutely.
All right, well, getting on here back to the book, let's pick out a few more definitions here. Let's see. Hamas, a Palestinian homemade short-range rocket workshop.
Yeah, there are some vicious ones.
Yeah.
Yasser Arafat didn't react well to polonium-210. Anti-Semites, brutally honest people, often of Jewish origin. Arabs, a particularly unpleasant species of goyim who were invented to push us into the sea. I think that the bar mitzvah good is one. Bar mitzvah, do you know what is a bar mitzvah?
Well, I know what I know it is, but let me flip back to the book here.
Yeah, it's kind of when the Jewish boy is 13 years old, the moment when the male Jew accepts that his foreskin is not going to grow back.
Okay, we're pushing the bounds of FCC permission with that one here. I'm going to flip...
All right, I'm sorry. I didn't realize, you know.
We have to be politically correct. Gilad, you need to understand something about being in the United States of America. We may be showering white-hot flaming death on innocent people around the world, but we do not use bad words on the radio to prove we are a just and moral people.
I'm sorry. I'm here with Tim Kalian, and we had the same problem in his program. You know, I behave like the way I am, you know, and
I'm just pulling your ankle. I'm just pulling your ankle.
All right.
Gilad.
Catch 22 is good. Free ham. You know,
that is.
Yeah, it's vicious. Circumcision. Where is circumcision? I think that we have concentration camp.
Yes.
So we stay focused.
Yes.
Circumcision is very good. Circumcision, yeah. To cut a long story short, Jewish women won't bite unless there is 15% off.
Okay.
Female circumcision is even more interesting. Popular in anti-Zionist countries, it involves the removal of the clitoris.
Okay, I'm going to have to draw the line here because you need to learn the rules here, and I don't want to.
But I didn't use a swear word. It was kind of really medical.
Okay.
It was medical. Oh no, it's not allowed even to use.
How about we're going to take another commercial break here? How about the definition of Muslims? People who refuse to believe in Coca-Cola. All right, we're going to take a commercial break. Another 4 minutes. We'll be back finishing the show with Gilad Atzmon. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Last segment of our program today. We're finishing up with Gilad Atzmon, saxophone star, author. I went through the book here on the commercial break, and I picked out a few more definitions, which I would like to share with our listenership. Dimona, a kosher nuclear bomb factory in southern Israel. That's the IDF, the most moral army in the world. It always thinks twice before it decides to kill civilians, and it never forgets to apologize. Let's see what else we have here. Light unto the nations, white phosphorus in Gaza.
True, isn't it?
Yes, it is, absolutely. And I love the definition for the Quran. A problem, it is still more popular than Harry Potter.
And Anna Frank as well.
And Anne Frank.
Yeah, I think that, I can see where the problem. Some of them, Mein Kampf is good. Actually, our camp is bigger.
Yeah, your camp is bigger here. And I think my favorite here, after klezmer music, is Washington, our most powerful colony.
Yeah, you are very powerful. Do you know what is the word Meshuggah? It's kind of a crazy. I know that some American, like I heard it, Madonna, I'm going Meshuggah and all this time. So I thought maybe it made it into America, but apparently not.
No, I've heard the word before.
For no reason.
Yeah.
9/11 is good.
Yes.
A nice German sports car.
Yes, that's a good one. I also liked Kabbalah, making Madonna look spiritual.
Yeah, she is spiritual.
All right, well, listen.
A lubricant that Arabs are happy to give away, but Anglo-Americans prefer to plunder.
All right. Well, listen. We don't want to give the whole book away because then they won't have a reason to buy it. You're right. Yeah. We just.
You see, you have to remind the Jew, how to market. How embarrassing.
Remember, back in the 1400s, my family was Jewish. If it hadn't been for the Inquisition, I would have been a rich Hollywood Jew today myself. So we've got about 7 minutes left here. What else would you like to share with our listeners?
I'm about really in the tour in America. I'm about to blow the whistle quite hard on the Palestinian solidarity movement, and I'm about to publish quite a devastating paper. I realized that in the last 10 years. The terminology of this discourse shifted radically, while in the early days when I joined this movement, it was very clear that at the heart of the Palestinian cause, we could find the right of return. There are millions of Palestinian refugees all over the world, all over the region. Some of them are living in atrocious conditions for many years in Lebanon. The situation now in Syria is devastating. And right of return is a very, very simple concept. Yet, due to the growing influence of Jews, progressive Jews in the movement, we have left the Palestinian right of return behind. Nobody hardly speak about it, and instead we have completely new terminology that is misleading, and at the end of the day is there to legitimize the Jewish state. For instance, instead of talking about right of return, we are talking about end of occupation. End of occupation is legitimization of the Jewish state within pre-1967 borders. Instead of talking about right of return, we start to call Israel colonialism. Israel has never been a colonial project. Not Israel and not Zionism. I can explain it. But why we call Israel colonialism? Because if Israel is colonialism, Zionism is not unique. It's like all other colonial projects. It gives us a feeling that there is a nice future in the end. We call Israel apartheid. again, this legitimizes Israel because apartheid is a concept with a solution. You know, we have apartheid and then we have post-apartheid. Israel is not apartheid. It has never been apartheid. Apartheid is a system of exploitation. Israel doesn't want to exploit the Palestinians. It wants them gone. Israel is an Hitlerian system of ethnic cleansing that is racially driven. And what I'm doing in my coming talks, I show how the discourse of the oppressed is now dominated by the interests of the oppressors, and I come short of pointing at the few Palestinian bodies that let it happen, but it is very clear which are the Jewish organizations that led us into this situation. It would, would you believe that, let's just say, Mandela would allow Afrikaners to dominate his discourse? Would Malcolm X let reformed Ku Klux Klan members to tell you saying what not to say? The Palestinians solidarity movement was led into this dark corner, and obviously it managed to achieve nothing, and now I can identify the problem. It's going to be devastating, but it is well argued. I shared it with a few Palestinian scholars, with a few activists, and that they all admit to me that my argument is very, very persuasive.
All right. So when do you think that might be up on your website that we could link to and read it?
I believe that I may even put it up tomorrow. I have to decide when to put it because it's a series of talks that I gave in Europe in the last few weeks, and from tomorrow I'm starting to talk about this in the context of my book, because my book is all about terminology, and I want people to understand how terminology is crucial. When it comes to it, when we understand what they did to the Palestinian discourse, maybe we'll find time to look at the civil rights movement and to see how this movement has been plundered, and how is it possible that actually black Americans achieved very little out of this movement, but actually Jewish left has located themselves as the master of the discourse of racism. It is very, very interesting.
Well, certainly, I think you probably find a lot of people in Baltimore right now saying that
Exactly.
civil rights movement hasn't materially changed their lives, and it is an area of concern as the economy tightens up. The haves are grabbing more and the have-nots have got less, and they're getting very angry. We're down to about 2 minutes here, and Gilad, again, the book is funny. I think most people are going to read it and really enjoy it. There might be one or two here and there who, because of their political views, are going to be offended by some of the stuff in there. But it is a lot of fun, and Claire and I really did enjoy it. So
this is great.
And
thank you so much for your time. And please, if people listening to us in LA, in San Diego, in Denver, please come and see me this weekend. Tomorrow in Denver, Elaine's on Sunday, San Diego on Monday, and then we continue to skip, for bounce from city to city.
Well, we do have the links from my website to the tour dates and venues information, both at Wandering Who and over at gilad.co.uk. So there's no excuse for people not knowing where you are, where you're going to be, and I hope they're all friendly when they show up. But, keep an eye out for Abe Foxman. He probably is not going to like your book very much.
And let me tell you something. If somebody is not friendly and even consider violence, you have to take into consideration the fact that I'm big and frightening.
I'll tell you what, I'll ship you one of my extra bulletproof vests for your next speech there. All right, Gilad, thank you very much. We're going to have to let you go. The music is playing, and that means it's time for us to end our show, for me to go and do some work on the new version of WhatReallyHappened.com. We will be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network, Pauhana Friday, and until then, again, call to Rivero's Rangers. Please call your local talk radio station. Ask them to seriously seriously look at carrying the programming from the Genesis Communication Network, because we are making a difference out there, and we need your help to continue to do so. Aloha, America.